Far away from Earth, beyond the last traces of our solar system, something strange happened one quiet night. At a small research station orbiting the moon, a group of scientists sat watching the endless data coming from deep space scanners. Most nights were the same, static numbers and cosmic noise. But that night, something different appeared on their screens. It was a sound, faint but rhythmic, hidden under layers of interference. It wasn't random. It had a pattern, like someone trying to talk. At first, the scientists thought it was just another radio burst from a pulsar or a distant collapsing star. But when they zoomed in and analyzed the waves, they saw it repeated every 22 minutes. Each repetition had tiny variations, almost like someone was shouting through the storm of space. It was not nature, it was intelligence. The realization hit the team like a shockwave. Someone, somewhere, was sending a message. They recorded the signal and sent it to Earth's Deep Space Communication Center. Within hours, the world's best linguists, mathematicians, and AI systems were trying to decode it. The message was complex, built from strange harmonics and mathematical sequences that no human language had ever used. It wasn't just words, it was emotion encoded in sound. The deeper they studied, the more uneasy everyone felt. There was something desperate in it, like a cry from a drowning soul. For weeks, the signal kept coming. It grew clearer, as if whoever was sending it knew Earth was listening. The media caught wind of it, and soon the whole planet was watching. Some believed it was a hoax. Others feared it was a trap. But the scientists knew better. This wasn't human work. It came from a distance no known probe could reach, over 600 light-years away in a region of space humanity had only studied through telescopes. Then, the breakthrough came. One AI program finally detected a repeating mathematical code, a universal constant pattern used in prime numbers. It was like finding a key in a lock. Using that key, they slowly began to translate the meaning. What emerged wasn't a greeting. It wasn't an introduction or an exchange of knowledge. It was a plea. The words, once converted to human language, chilled everyone in the control room. They are coming. We are dying, please! Mercy. That short line spread across the world in hours. News networks replayed it endlessly. Commentators debated what they meant. Some said it was just a dying alien civilization asking for help. Others feared that they were invaders and the message was a warning to run or hide. Governments called emergency meetings. The United Nations held special sessions that lasted all night. Even ordinary people began pointing telescopes at the sky, wondering who was crying out across the darkness. In a laboratory in Geneva, a linguist named Dr. Lena Carter stared at the audio waveforms for hours. She said softly, "This isn't just a distress call. It's fear. Whoever sent this knows they might not survive." Around her, technicians exchanged worried glances. The thought of another intelligent species, one that could feel fear, pain, and desperation, made the universe suddenly feel smaller and far more dangerous. Meanwhile, deep in an underground base in Nevada, military analysts were studying the same signal. They detected faint background echoes, bursts of radiation that looked like weapons fire. If that interpretation was correct, then the message wasn't just emotional. It was literal. Someone was under attack. A war was happening somewhere out there, far beyond human reach, but powerful enough for its cries to cross interstellar space. As days passed, more data came in. The signal source was traced to a dying star system, surrounded by a debris field the size of a small nebula. Something catastrophic was happening there. Massive energy spikes suggested entire planets had been destroyed or burned. Astronomers called it the silent zone, because nothing natural could explain the energy patterns. Public fear grew. Talk shows filled with wild theories. Some said the aliens were asking for help. Others warned that helping them would bring their enemies to Earth. Social media erupted with posts like, "Don't answer," and "We must help them." Humanity stood divided between hope and terror. In the middle of all this chaos, the signal changed again. It became slower, weaker, as if whoever was sending it was losing strength. Then one night, after 73 days of continuous transmission, it stopped completely. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. People waited. Days turned into weeks. Nothing more came. Some said the aliens were gone. Others believed the attackers had silenced them forever. But for scientists, the mystery only deepened. In the final moments before the signal ended, a fragment of new data appeared. Coordinates. a location in space. No one knew if it was a place of safety or the site of the disaster. Dr. Lena Carter looked at those coordinates on the screen. It was so far away that even the fastest human probe would take centuries to reach. But for her, that didn't matter. They reached out to us, she said quietly. They trusted that someone would hear them. At the same time, military leaders were thinking differently. If there was one dying species, there might be another. The killers. What if Earth's technology grew strong enough to draw attention one day? What if the same thing that destroyed those aliens came for humanity next? For the first time, humans truly felt what it meant to be small in a violent universe. Astronomers continued to watch the silent zone. Some nights, faint pulses of light flickered again in that region, random, fading like dying stars gasping for breath. But they weren't random. They followed the same rhythmic pattern as the original signal, only weaker. Someone or something was still trying to speak. News outlets began calling it the Alien SOS. That name spread like wildfire. It appeared on every newspaper, on every channel, across every language. Even those who didn't believe in aliens now felt the chill of possibility. Something intelligent had begged for mercy in the dark, and humanity had been the one to hear it. In schools, children asked teachers what would happen next. "Will we go help them?" they asked, but no one had an answer. Scientists warned that any reply might take centuries to reach its source. But the military argued that the message itself was a threat. The president of the United Earth Coalition finally spoke publicly, saying, "We do not yet know who called out to us, but we will not turn away from those in need." Humanity has always answered cries for help. The words brought comfort to some but fear to others. Because if humans could hear them, then maybe others could hear Earth too. In the following months, a special task force was created, the Interstellar Signal Analysis Division. Their mission was to study the transmission, decode its deeper meaning, and determine if responding was safe. Teams from every major space agency joined, working day and night. Satellites were recalibrated, new telescopes launched, and deep space antennas aligned toward the silent zone. One night, when everyone thought the signal was lost forever, a strange echo appeared again. It was faint, barely audible, but unmistakably similar to the first. However, this time there was no plea. There was only one repeating word that no one could understand, until the AI finished translating it. The word meant hurry. That single word changed everything. If they were still alive, they didn't have much time. Something terrible was closing in on them. Humanity had to make a choice, to stay silent and safe or to act and risk everything. For now, Earth only listened. But the silence of the stars felt heavier than ever before. People looked up at the night sky differently, wondering if the stars were still shining over those who had cried for mercy, or if they had already been extinguished. No one could know it then. But that night marked the beginning of a new age. The message that came as a whisper would soon pull humanity into the greatest test of courage it had ever faced. And when the final translation was completed, historians would later write that it was the moment the universe truly met mankind. After months of study, the meaning of the alien signal finally became clear. What scientists first thought was a simple distress call turned out to be a message filled with history, emotion, and regret. The advanced computer systems managed to decode more layers hidden inside the transmission, pulses that carried images, symbols, and fragments of sound. When those fragments were finally arranged in the right sequence, a horrifying story unfolded before the eyes of everyone in the control room. The aliens were not just asking for mercy. They were asking for forgiveness. They called themselves the Alerians, a species that once ruled a large part of their galaxy. In their own recorded words, they admitted they had been conquerors, taking planets and forcing weaker civilizations to serve them. For centuries, they had believed they were invincible, destined to rule forever, but then something unexpected happened. They met another species that was even more ruthless, stronger, and colder than they had ever been. The message described that enemy only as the Devourers. From what could be understood, the Devourers didn't communicate, negotiate, or reason. They simply destroyed everything in their path, stripping planets of life, draining oceans, and leaving only dust behind. The Illyrians tried to fight them using their greatest weapons, but nothing worked. Their fleets were burned to ashes. Their homeworld was attacked first, its surface turned into glass. The survivors fled across the stars, sending out distress calls in every direction, hoping that someone, anyone, would hear. Now, hundreds of years later, one of those ancient calls had reached Earth. The more data scientists extracted from the signal, the more it felt like listening to a dying voice echoing from the past. The Illyrians didn't expect help. They knew their end was near. They only wanted their story to be known, their mistakes to be remembered. They begged whoever heard them to never repeat their path, to never believe that power made a species safe. But near the end of the transmission, something changed. The tone shifted from sorrow to panic. Illyrian voices shouted words the translators barely understood. "They have found us again." That was when the message turned into pure noise. When the translation team revealed this to the world's leaders, the room went silent. The president of the Earth Coalition stared at the holographic projection of the dying alien world. "If this is true," she said, "then somewhere out there these devourers might still exist." The discovery caused chaos across the planet. News agencies reported it as the biggest revelation in human history. Crowds gathered in cities, some lighting candles to mourn the lost civilization, others protesting that Earth should not get involved. Religious leaders gave speeches saying this was proof that life existed beyond humanity and that Earth was being tested to show compassion even to those who once did evil. But inside the United Earth Defense Council, compassion was not the only topic. Generals and strategists analyzed the data carefully. They noticed something alarming. The Illyrians had used specific energy frequencies in their distress call, frequencies that matched the radiation patterns of high-energy weapon systems. If the Devourers could track those frequencies, then by listening to the message, Earth might have exposed itself. "By hearing them," said Admiral Rakesh Patel during the emergency meeting, "we may have told the galaxy where we are." His voice echoed across the silent chamber. "If these creatures still exist, they might one day come looking for us." Meanwhile, scientists continued to study the alien data. The holographic fragments showed massive cities built from crystal and light, starships bigger than continents, and skies filled with fire. The destruction was beyond imagination. It made every human war seem like a small quarrel in comparison. What terrified people most was that the Illyrians were advanced, far beyond human technology, and still they had fallen. Dr. Lena Carter and her team worked day and night to translate the last pieces of the alien language. In one section, they found a description of the Devourer's arrival. The Illyrians had watched whole star systems go dark as these creatures spread. Their ships didn't use engines like normal vessels. They seemed alive, moving like swarms of insects through the void. No negotiations, no peace offers, just pure destruction. One late evening, as Lena replayed a segment of the decoded images, she whispered, "They weren't just fighting for survival. They were trying to warn us." Her assistant frowned. "Warn us about what?" She looked up with tired eyes and said, "That mercy without strength is meaningless. They showed mercy once to the wrong species and it destroyed them. As this information spread, Earth became divided. Some leaders wanted to prepare for the worst, building defenses and developing stronger weapons. Others argued that humanity should send a message of compassion, proving it could be better than the conquerors of the past. The debate grew fierce. Television networks aired live discussions, scientists versus generals, peace activists versus politicians. For the first time, the entire planet was united by fear of something no one had ever seen. In secret, however, the Defense Council began drafting plans. The idea was simple. If the Devourers still existed, Earth could not afford to wait until they appeared. They needed to be ready. Fleets were reorganized, new weapons were tested, and plans for deep space patrols were quietly approved. But everything was done under the name of exploration, so that the public would not panic. While governments argued and armies prepared, ordinary people looked up at the night sky differently. They wondered which star had once been home to the Illyrians. Some even built online communities dedicated to translating alien messages, sharing theories, and creating art inspired by their final words. Children drew pictures of shining blue aliens and heroic humans flying to their rescue. Humanity had never felt so connected to the universe and yet so afraid of it. Months later, a second discovery was made. The radio telescopes picked up faint energy patterns coming from the same coordinates as before, the silent zone. But this time, it wasn't a distress call. It was chaos. Bursts of radiation flared and faded like explosions. It seemed another battle was happening out there. Some scientists argued that it was just cosmic noise, but others were sure someone was still fighting. That new information reignited the debate. "If someone is still out there," said the president in her global address, "we cannot ignore their cries. To be human is to care, but to survive, we must be wise." The message spread hope to millions, but in the halls of power it meant something else entirely. The military began to discuss not just sending a reply, but sending ships. In the following weeks, the AI systems discovered hidden layers inside the alien data: maps, coordinates, and something that looked like weapon designs. At first they thought it was defensive technology, but then realized these were blueprints for ships far more advanced than anything Earth had built. Perhaps the Illyrians had hoped their designs would help whoever found their message. Maybe they wanted their mistake to serve as a warning and a gift. One night, Lena sat alone in the lab, staring at the holographic projection of an Illyrian child, crying and looking up as fire fell from the sky. It was only a recording, but it felt painfully real, she whispered to herself. They begged us not to make the same choices they did, but we're already doing it. She knew that governments were secretly preparing warships, even while pretending to the public that Earth only wanted peace. At the same time, new information came in that shocked everyone. A deep space probe orbiting near Saturn detected faint energy waves matching the frequency of the alien distress call. Somehow the signal had bounced off something, an invisible structure beyond the edge of the solar system. It meant the message had passed closer to Earth than anyone realized. Whatever had destroyed the Illyrians might have left traces nearby. The world trembled at that news. People stopped looking at the sky with wonder. They looked with dread. What if the Devourers were already on their way? What if listening had marked humanity for destruction? Despite the fear, hope remained. A small group of scientists and explorers believed that humanity could still act differently, that they could answer the call, not with fear, but with courage. They argued that if the Illyrians had once been conquerors who learned mercy too late, humanity could be the species that showed mercy at the right time. The leaders of Earth stood at a crossroads. To do nothing meant ignoring a plea from a dying race, but to act meant entering a danger no human had ever faced. After weeks of secret discussions, the Council finally decided Earth would respond, but on its own terms. Not as saviors and not as victims. Humanity would prepare for both peace and war. That night, as Lena walked out of the lab, she looked up at the stars one more time. The universe seemed endless, silent, and full of secrets. Somewhere out there, a civilization had fallen after begging for mercy. Now, humanity had inherited both their warning and their responsibility. The line between mercy and survival had never been so thin, and though no one said it aloud, a quiet truth was beginning to form. If mercy failed once before, perhaps this time, humanity's answer would have to be different. The world was silent when the final decision day arrived. For months, Earth's greatest minds had argued, planned, and fought behind closed doors. The alien distress call had changed everything. It had shown humanity the face of a dying civilization, one that had once been powerful but had fallen to a greater darkness. Now the question hung over every nation, every leader, every person who looked up at the stars. What should humanity do? At first, most believed that helping the aliens was impossible. The Illyrians were too far away, hundreds of light years beyond reach. Even a message would take centuries to arrive. But for others, the question wasn't about speed or technology. It was about principle. Humanity had always claimed to be compassionate, to care for others. Would they now ignore a cry for mercy, just because it came from another species? The United Earth Council called an emergency session. It took place in the orbital station known as Horizon Point, a massive structure floating above the Earth like a shining ring. Delegates from every major country attended, along with scientists, military commanders, and representatives from the global space fleet. Every screen in the chamber showed the same image, the frozen hologram of the Illyrian message, the words, "Please, mercy." The debate began with cautious voices. Dr. Lena Carter, the linguist who had helped decode the message, stood before the assembly. Her voice trembled not from fear but from emotion. "They reached across the stars to us," she said. "They believed that someone somewhere would hear them. They didn't ask for weapons or power. They asked for compassion. If we ignore them, we prove that humanity is no better than those who destroyed them." Applause followed her speech, but it didn't last long. Admiral Rakesh Patel, Head of the Defense Council stood up next. Compassion is noble, he said, but compassion without strength is suicide. We know almost nothing about these so-called devourers. We don't know their numbers, their technology, or their intentions. If they find out we exist, they might come for us next. We cannot help anyone if we are dead. The chamber erupted into noise, shouts, debates, and arguments in dozens of languages. Some leaders supported Patel, warning that Earth's first duty was to protect its people. Others sided with Lena, saying that humanity had a moral responsibility to answer. Hours turned into days, and still no decision was made. The world below waited anxiously, watching news updates that offered no clear answers, while the politicians argued something else was happening in secret. Inside a hidden facility under the Arctic ice, a team of engineers and military planners had been working quietly for months on a project called Operation Horizon Shield. It was a plan to create a unified interstellar fleet, an armada not for exploration, but for defense. Humanity had finally accepted that space was no longer empty and peaceful. The universe was dangerous, and Earth had to be ready. Back in the council chamber, tensions reached a breaking point. Reports from observatories near Jupiter showed strange disturbances, energy pulses that matched the frequency of the Illyrian distress signal. The scientists claimed it was just a reflection, an echo bouncing off cosmic dust. But the military feared otherwise. What if something had followed the signal? What if the devourers were already on their way? The news changed everything. The tone of the debate turned from compassion to survival. If we wait for proof, said General Alvarez from Brazil, it will be too late. We must act first. We must show the galaxy that Earth will not beg for mercy. It will defend it. The president of the Earth Coalition listened quietly. She had been silent through most of the meeting, studying the faces of those around her. Some were terrified, others burning with pride. Finally, she stood up. The room went still. Humanity was born on a small blue world, she began. For centuries, we fought each other, we destroyed our home, and then we rebuilt it. We learned that survival and mercy are both necessary, but we also learned that peace cannot exist without the power to protect it. She paused and looked up at the hologram of the Illyrian message. These beings begged for mercy. They were not asking for weakness, they were asking for justice. And if the devourers are still out there, then Earth will not stand by while the innocent are destroyed. We will answer their call, but we will answer it with strength. Her words spread across the world like wildfire. The decision had been made. Earth would respond, not with an apology, not with a message of surrender, but with preparation. The global broadcast carried her voice to every nation. We are no longer alone in the universe. Let our answer be not fear, but courage. Let the stars know that humanity stands ready. Factories across the planet shifted production overnight. Spaceports lit up with new activity. Engineers, scientists, and pilots from every country were called to service. The dream of a united Earth fleet, once considered impossible, was now a necessity. For the first time in history, humanity worked together as one. Old rivalries vanished under a shared purpose. Nations that once competed for resources now shared technology. The great shipyards of Mars, Luna, and Titan began to construct warships designed for deep space travel. Machines of light and steel built to protect life itself. Each ship was a masterpiece. Powerful engines, adaptive shields, and weapons capable of defending against threats no human had ever faced. Yet the purpose of these ships wasn't conquest, it was survival. The fleet was named Project Dawn, symbolizing a new beginning for humankind. Not everyone celebrated, though. Protests erupted in major cities. Some people believed the decision to militarize space was a betrayal of human ideals. We should send peace, not war, one activist shouted on live television. But others answered back, peace must be defended. The argument split humanity once again, but this time, both sides shared the same fear, the unknown. Meanwhile, Dr. Lena Carter watched all of this from her lab. She was proud that humanity was finally united, but she also felt uneasy. The aliens had begged for mercy, and Earth's response was to build warships. It didn't feel right. She wondered if this was exactly what the Illyrians had done long ago, answer fear with power. She asked herself whether history was repeating itself. Still, there was no turning back. The fleet's first mission would not be to fight, but to search, to travel toward the coordinates of the Silent Zone and find out what had really happened there. If the Illyrians were still alive, Earth would try to reach them. If the Devourers still existed, humanity would be ready. Months passed and the first ships were completed. They were massive, gleaming vessels that symbolized both hope and defiance. The first to be launched was the ECS Valiant, commanded by Admiral Patel himself. It was a ship built for defense but armed like a fortress. When it lifted from the Martian docks, millions watched the broadcast in awe. The president's voice echoed through the transmission. "May this fleet carry the strength of our mercy and the mercy of our strength." In classrooms, children cheered as they watched the ships rise. In secret rooms, generals mapped out strategies for possible first contact. The universe that had once seemed quiet and cold was now alive with purpose. Humanity had taken its first step into the stars, not as explorers this time, but as protectors. Yet even as the celebrations continued, a shadow lingered. The scientists monitoring the deep space transmissions noticed something disturbing. Faint signals, almost invisible, began to echo back toward Earth. They didn't match the Illyrian distress call. They were colder, simpler, and repeated endlessly, like something scanning, searching. Lena heard the report and felt a chill run through her body. She knew what it meant. The universe had heard Earth's answer. Somewhere in the darkness, something was listening. The news was kept secret from the public. The fleet continued to grow, stronger each day. But behind every speech, every declaration of unity, there was a shared fear that humanity had just announced itself to forces far greater than it understood. And yet, no one stopped. It was too late to turn back. The engines of destiny had already started burning. Humanity had chosen its path, not silence, not surrender, but defiance. When the final assembly of the fleet stood ready, its ships glowed against the blackness of space, like a constellation built by human hands. The world watched as the fleet prepared to depart. Some prayed for peace, others whispered for victory. As the countdown began, Lena stood on the observation deck watching the blue curve of Earth below. She whispered softly, "May mercy guide us, and may strength protect us." The engines ignited, and the fleet began its journey into the unknown, toward the stars where a dying race had once begged for mercy. No one knew what awaited them out there, whether they would find allies, ruins, or death. But one thing was certain: humanity had made its choice. The universe had cried for help, and humanity had answered. Not with silence, not with surrender, but with warships carrying both the heart and the fury of Earth. The day the human fleet left the solar system became the most watched event in history. Billions of people across Earth, Mars, and the Moon stared at their screens as one by one, the massive ships rose from orbit, engines burning like small suns. These were not ships of exploration. They were ships of purpose, built to protect and, if necessary, to fight. The fleet was humanity's answer to the universe's first call for help. And as the engines roared to life, every human heart felt both pride and fear. The fleet consisted of over 100 vessels, each with its own role. There were carriers that could launch swarms of smaller ships, destroyers armed with rail cannons, and great dreadnoughts whose armor was thicker than a mountain's crust. The flagship was called the ECS Valiant, a name chosen to remind everyone that courage was the foundation of this mission. At its command was Admiral Rakesh Patel, the same man who had once warned that compassion without power was suicide. Now he was leading humanity's greatest journey into the stars. Inside the Valiant, the crew moved like clockwork. Engineers checked systems, pilots calibrated their navigation paths, and soldiers prepared for the unknown. The atmosphere was tense but determined. They all knew what was at stake. They were leaving home not just to explore but to defend something far greater, the idea that no cry for mercy should ever go unanswered again. Back on Earth, Dr. Lena Carter watched the launch from a control room in Geneva. She had been invited to join the fleet as a scientific advisor, but she chose to stay behind to monitor communication signals from Earth. "I'll be their voice from home," she had said quietly. Still, as she saw the ships disappear into the darkness, she felt a strange ache in her heart. She didn't know if they would ever come back. It took weeks for the fleet to reach the outer edge of the solar system. Their destination was a star system known as Nera 9, located 600 light-years away, the last known coordinates of the Illyrian distress call. The journey was long, but the fleet's new engines could bend space around them, cutting travel time drastically. Inside the ships, life settled into routine, training, maintenance, and constant readiness. For the soldiers, it was both exciting and terrifying. They were the first humans to leave the comfort of their star. They spent nights staring out of observation decks at the endless void, whispering to each other about what might be waiting. Would they find survivors? Or only the ashes of a forgotten war? Then, after nearly 2 months of travel, the first signs appeared. The fleet's long-range sensors detected massive debris fields ahead, broken ships, shattered stations, and chunks of metal drifting silently through space. The wreckage stretched for thousands of kilometers, like a graveyard of giants. When the first images reached the Valiant's main screen, the bridge fell silent. "These must be Illyrian ships," said Commander Reeves, studying the twisted remains. "Or what's left of them." Admiral Patel nodded grimly. "Prepare a recovery team. I want to know what happened here." The smaller scout vessels launched first, moving carefully among the wreckage. What they found was worse than anyone had expected. The ships were not just destroyed. They had been torn apart, melted by energy so powerful it defied understanding. There were no bodies, no signs of life, only fragments of structures and symbols written in the Illyrian language. Dr. Lena, listening from Earth, helped decode the markings as they sent images back. One phrase repeated again and again across the wreckage: "The devourers are endless." The words chilled everyone who read them. If these creatures could wipe out a civilization as advanced as the Illyrians, what chance did humanity truly have? Still, Admiral Patel pushed forward. "Fear is useless," he said during a fleet broadcast. "We came here to find the truth, and we will." The deeper they moved into the system, the more evidence they found of total destruction. Entire planets were scarred, oceans boiled away, cities reduced to glowing craters. But there was one world that still seemed intact. A small blue-green planet orbiting close to the dying star. It looked eerily similar to Earth. "Could there be survivors?" asked one of the officers. "Only one way to find out," Patel replied. "Set course for the planet." As the fleet approached the atmosphere, they detected faint energy readings from the surface, weak but organized, as if someone or something was still alive down there. The first landing teams descended cautiously, scanning for life signs. When they touched down, they saw the remains of enormous crystal towers half buried in dust. The air shimmered faintly with strange energy. Then they found it, a structure still powered, glowing softly beneath the sand. Inside was an ancient Illyrian relay station. When they activated it, a hologram flickered to life. It was the image of an Illyrian leader, wounded and weary, his voice breaking with emotion. "To whoever hears this, we fought until the end. They cannot be reasoned with. They consume all. If you have heard our cry, turn back, do not follow. Mercy cannot stop them, only fire." The hologram ended abruptly, and the silence that followed felt endless. Back on the Valiant, Patel clenched his fists. "They wanted us to turn back," he said quietly. "But we came too far for that." Moments later, alarms blared across the fleet. Sensors detected movement, massive signatures approaching from deep space. At first, they thought it was just debris drifting in, but then the shapes changed direction. They were ships, hundreds of them. The enemy had found them. "They're coming straight for us," shouted a radar officer. The command bridge erupted into activity. Orders flew across the channels, weapons charged, shields raised. Outside, the darkness lit up as distant flashes appeared. The enemy fleet was firing already, and then the Devourers arrived. No one had ever seen anything like them. Their ships were not made of metal, but of living black matter that moved like liquid. They glowed with crimson veins and emitted energy waves that disrupted sensors. The moment they entered range, they attacked without hesitation. The first salvo hit one of the smaller destroyers, ripping it apart in seconds. The explosion lit up the void like a new star. The human fleet responded instantly. Beams of plasma and railgun shells tore through the darkness, smashing into the strange organic ships. Some exploded, but others absorbed the impact as if feeding on the energy. Inside the Valiant, chaos ruled. "Target their cores," Patel shouted. "Focus fire. Don't let them close in." The battle raged for hours. Space burned with light and debris. The humans fought fiercely. Their training and technology pushed to the limit. They lost ships, but they also destroyed many of the enemies. The Devourers, it seemed, had not expected such strong resistance. Lena watched the live feed from Earth, tears in her eyes. She could see the explosions flicker across the blackness like fireworks in slow motion. She whispered to herself, "They're fighting for mercy, with fire." At one point, the Valiant itself was struck. The ship shook violently, alarms screaming as flames tore through the lower decks. Engineers rushed to contain the damage. Patel refused to retreat. "We hold this line," he said. "If we fall here, Earth will be next." Using every ounce of power left, the fleet coordinated one final strike. They overloaded their energy, weapons, channeling all their reserves into a synchronized barrage. The result was blinding, a storm of light that tore through the enemy formation. When the glow faded, most of the Devourer ships were gone, disintegrated into dust. The rest scattered into the dark. The battlefield fell silent. The surviving human ships floated among the wreckage, damaged but alive. The cost was heavy. Dozens of ships lost, thousands of brave souls gone. But they had done what no one thought possible. Humanity had stood against the Devourers and survived. Patel gave the order to recover what they could and honor the fallen. "Let this place be remembered," he said, his voice heavy but proud. "We came to answer a call for mercy, and we did so with strength. The universe will know. Humans do not turn away from the cries of others." Back on Earth, when the transmission finally reached home, the world erupted in emotion. People cried, prayed, and celebrated. The message spread across every screen. The fleet fought, and won. Humanity had become more than a world. It had become a force of protection. As the damaged ships began their long journey home, Lena sent one final transmission to the Valiant. Her voice was soft but clear. "You showed them what mercy means when it's defended by courage. You've written humanity's name among the stars." The stars around the fleet twinkled faintly, as if the universe itself was watching. The battlefield was silent now, but somewhere in that silence a promise echoed. A promise that if the darkness ever rose again, humanity would be there to face it. For the first time in history, the galaxy had seen what humans could do, not as conquerors, not as victims, but as defenders. The Aelirians' cry for help had reached the Deathworlders, and humanity had answered it with warships and unbreakable will. The sky burned and mercy was delivered through fire. The long journey home began in silence. The once mighty fleet was now a shadow of its former strength. Many ships were missing, and those that survived carried scars of battle, burned hulls, shattered decks, and flickering lights. But inside those damaged ships, the hearts of their crews still burned bright with pride. They had faced an enemy that destroyed entire civilizations and lived to tell the tale. For the first time in history, humanity had stepped into the dark and proven that it could fight not just for itself, but for others. Admiral Rakesh Patel stood in the observation bay of the Valiant, staring at the wreckage drifting behind them. The bodies of fallen ships floated silently among the stars like tombstones in the void. His reflection in the glass looked older, heavier. He had seen too much loss, too much fire. Yet despite everything, there was peace in his eyes. He whispered to himself, "We came to bring mercy, and mercy always has a price." Messages from across the fleet filled the airwaves. Some were reports. Some were final words recorded by those who didn't survive. And some were simple songs sung by tired voices trying to stay awake through the endless dark. Each message was collected, stored carefully in the fleet's archives, a memory of courage that would be sent back to Earth. Dr. Lena Carter from her command center in Geneva had been waiting for weeks. The battle's last signal had reached Earth after long delays, and for days there was silence. Many feared the fleet had been lost. Then one night her console lit up with a faint signal, a heartbeat of static followed by a familiar voice. "This is Admiral Patel, to Earth Command. Mission complete." "We held the line." Lena froze. For a moment she couldn't breathe. Tears welled up in her eyes as she replied, "We hear you, Admiral. Welcome home." The news spread like wildfire across the world. People came out into the streets waving flags, lighting candles, and crying with joy. Cities that had once been silent with fear now sang with celebration. Children looked up at the night sky, imagining the brave men and women among the stars who had saved not just another world, but humanity's honor. But for the ones still in space, celebration felt far away. Their joy was mixed with grief. Every corridor of every ship echoed with memories of the fallen. Crewmates left behind empty bunks, half-written letters, and laughter that would never return. Some soldiers sat by the windows staring at the stars, whispering the names of their friends to the endless dark. On the Valiant, a small ceremony was held. Hundreds gathered in the hangar bay, standing in silence before the holographic memorial that displayed the faces of the dead. Admiral Patel spoke softly. "We fought for a people we had never met. We fought for a mercy they believed was gone. And in doing so, we found something greater than victory. We found purpose." When the speech ended, the crew released capsules into space, each containing the ashes or belongings of a fallen comrade. The capsules drifted away, glowing faintly before disappearing into the stars. It was a sight no one would ever forget, a river of light flowing into the darkness. As the fleet continued its slow journey back, scientists aboard the ships studied the remains of the Devourer's technology. What they found was both fascinating and terrifying. The creatures weren't just biological. They were part machine, part living energy, a fusion of evolution and nightmare. Their weapons operated on frequencies that bent the laws of physics. But there was something else, traces of signals like commands coming from far away. That discovery changed everything. It meant the Devourers were not just a mindless swarm. Something somewhere was controlling them. The war was not over. It had only just begun. Admiral Patel called for a private council. He knew the world wasn't ready for another war, not yet. But he also knew that hiding the truth could be worse. "We'll tell them what they need to know," he said. Not to scare them, but to prepare them. When the fleet finally entered the solar system months later, Earth looked brighter than ever. As the ships approached, thousands of smaller crafts flew out to greet them. Scouts, supply vessels, even civilian ships decorated with lights and banners. The entire planet seemed to glow with pride. The Valiant descended through the atmosphere like a falling star. Crowds gathered across continents to watch the landing. When the ship finally touched down, the world erupted in cheers. The heroes had returned. Admiral Patel, Lena Carter, and the surviving officers were welcomed by leaders from every nation. But Patel did not smile during the ceremony. He knew that their victory had only bought time. Still, he accepted the honors on behalf of the fallen. "They gave their lives for hope," he said to the cameras. "Let us make sure that hope was not wasted." In the months that followed, Earth changed. The governments of the world united to form the Interstellar Defense Alliance, dedicated to protecting not only humanity, but any civilization that faced the same threat. The fleet was rebuilt, stronger and smarter. New recruits lined up from every continent, inspired by the bravery of those who had gone before. The human spirit, once divided by borders and beliefs, had found unity among the stars. Lena became one of the leading voices in the new era. She worked tirelessly to decode the Alerian technology recovered from the ruins. Using their knowledge, humans developed new energy systems, advanced shields, and faster ships. But one discovery troubled her deeply. A small Alerian data file that contained star maps marked with hundreds of destroyed systems. The Devourers had been spreading for centuries. The war, she realized, was much larger than anyone could imagine. One night, Lena stood alone at the top of the Geneva Tower looking up at the sky. A faint trail of lights crossed the heavens, the returning ships reflecting sunlight. She thought about the Illyrians, their final message, and the humans who had died to honor it. "They begged for mercy," she whispered. "And we answered. But how many more cries are waiting out there?" Her words echoed through her mind as she returned to her lab, determined to find answers. Somewhere deep inside her heart, she knew that humanity's role in the galaxy had changed forever. They were no longer just explorers or survivors. They were guardians. Admiral Patel retired quietly months later, refusing most interviews. He settled near the ocean, spending his days walking the shores and watching the waves. Sometimes children would recognize him and run up to ask if he had really fought aliens. He would smile softly and nod, saying only, "We fought for peace." But when the night came and he looked up at the stars, his eyes would grow distant. He knew the Devourers would return one day. He also knew humanity would be ready. Years passed and the story of the fleet became legend. It was taught in schools, sung in songs, and carved into monuments. Statues of the fallen stood in every major city, reminders that courage could burn brighter than fear. Humanity had learned something profound, that mercy without strength could fade, but strength guided by mercy could change the universe. One day, a new signal was detected, weak, far away, but unmistakably a call for help. Scientists rushed to decode it, and when the translation appeared, the words were familiar. "They are coming. Please help us." Lena, now older and grayer but still full of determination, stood before the new generation of officers in the Interstellar Command Hall. She looked at them and smiled faintly. "We once answered a call like this," she said, "and it changed us forever. Now it's your turn." Outside the massive windows of the hall, the new human fleet was ready, bigger, faster, and stronger than ever. Ships gleamed in orbit, their engines glowing blue against the blackness. The name on the lead vessel read ECS Valiant 2. As the countdown began, the same words echoed through every channel that had been spoken years ago. For mercy, for unity, for humanity. The engines flared to life, lighting up the night sky. Millions on Earth watched once again as their defenders rose into the stars. The soundless flames danced across the heavens, and people whispered the same prayer that had been spoken long ago. Bring them home. The fleet disappeared into the darkness following the signal. Somewhere out there, another world was begging for mercy, and humanity, strong, scarred, but unbroken, was already on its way. The stars shimmered above, silent witnesses to humanity's promise. The galaxy would never forget the day when the Deathworlders answered the call, not with fear, not with surrender, but with warships, courage, and hearts that refused to let mercy die.